Hey guys, welcome back to the Gregory Wright Show. Really appreciate your patronage. I first set this video to take place live stream last night at 8:15, but there were personal issues that came up that prevented me from going live at that time. But I'm pretty sure that you guys don't care about that. There's three things for free that you could do for me is you could like, share, subscribe this video. You will shock the YouTube algorithm in getting my message out. If you don't know about me, read my biography on my YouTube profile. My channel is The Gregory Wright Show. And we're about to get into why Susie Wiles went to interview with Vanity Fair and said some nefarious stuff about her own staff. She talking shit about her own staff, y'all. Why did she do it? Well, there's probably three reasons why she did it. Number one reason is that she is genuinely frustrated on about President Trump's retribution against his political enemies that tried to throw him in jail for over 700 years. She's frustrated with the vice president and Marco Rubio and Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi, especially when it comes to releasing the Epstein file. The second reason could be because she wants to nationalize herself, because I believe that she's looking to run for the Republican National Convention presidential primary as a candidate for 2028. And then the last reason I think is she came out and said all this because of, to change the narrative. Now, the narrative before Rob Reiner and, Susie Wiles and all this other kind of stuff, the narrative against the Republican Party was the Epstein files, narco boat missile strikes, and even though I don't think they had much to do with the Somali fraud in Minnesota, but you got a lot of people that and if you're just joining us, folks, I really appreciate you rejoining. If you just joined, I started a feed about 45 minutes ago, and it died. Maybe I hit the mouse the wrong way, but if you're back, welcome back. We're talking about Susie Wiles and why she interviewed with Vanity Fair, knowing that Vanity Fair is a left-leaning organization known for its publication. To my knowledge, I don't think that they have a video platform yet, but an organization as big as Vanity Fair that's been operating for at least over 30 years, if they choose to keep their publications in printed form, like magazines and newspapers and stuff like that, or articles within a newspaper, then that is a sound decision based on their business model. And here's what it is. I think that Miss Susie Wiles is trying to bring herself I have two daughters in their early 20s. We voted for the presidential candidate who was found guilty of felonies and was found liable for sexual abuse because of our strong values. Okay, well, all right, well, you're entitled to your opinion, but I think that if President Trump was truly found guilty and that would have prevented him from being the 47th president current day, I don't think he would be. And so laws exist for a reason. The system exists for a reason. And, you know, I guess if you have a bunch of money and influence, then you can benefit from what President Trump has benefited from. Myself, listen, I'm not an angel, and so I had to spend money to get my ass out of hot water a couple of times, and you know, it's not a bad thing. I don't feel guilty about it. But let's bring the subject back to Susie Wiles. So we're gonna get into, and here's the thing about that I don't like about Susie Wiles and what she said to Vanity Fair. Susie Wiles needs to shut up, and if she wants to catapult herself on the national stage, then she needs to be honest about that and just do it, and giving people the proper heads up that you may say some things that are controversial. I don't believe that when she went on this interview with Vanity Fair that she gave any of her staff members, including the president, who's her boss. I don't believe that she may have given him a heads up that she was going on Vanity Fair, but she may not have come clean on her thoughts on the Trump administration thus far. And you know, we're going on a 12th month. You know, President Trump has been sworn in January 20th this year. We're rapidly approaching January 20th, 2026. And so there's been a lot of exposure to Donald Trump's policies in terms of mainstream media and right-leaning media such as Steve Bannon and Turning Point USA, Candace Owens, myself, and so when we're trying to look at what the current narrative is all about Susie Wiles and Rob Reiner. But before the Brown University shooting took place, and I forgot which state it was, and then you got the Rob Reiner and all this other kind of stuff, that detracts away from the Epstein file stuff. That detracts away from the narco boat missile shootings, and that detracts away from the Somali fraud in Minnesota. So Susie Wiles just needs to understand that she needs to keep her mouth shut and be loyal to the Trump administration, because President Donald Trump got you where you are right now, and you should never forget that. And as far as J.D. Vance is concerned, if you're looking to nationalize yourself to be a candidate for the 2028 RNC candidate primary, J.D. Vance is going to be your direct competition. And so is Marco Rubio. So you have to be careful about what you do and how you do it, because look at Marjorie Taylor Greene. Marjorie Taylor Greene was so hell bent, and instead of Marjorie Taylor Greene coming out and say that I want to go statewide. I want to go statewide because right now she's just a U.S. House of Representative that's representing one district in, what state is she from? Georgia. One district in the state of Georgia. Now, running for governor or U.S. House, the U.S. Senate representing Georgia, now you have to nationalize yourself. And, President Trump came to her with the numbers. He always brings the receipts when he has a candid conversation with members of his team or the opposition. And so, Trump came to her, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and said, look, if you choose to run for governor of the state of Georgia, you're not going to win based on the polls. And then when you look at the polls, you cannot only look at just the percentage between the two people. You have to look at the crosstabs, the demographics, the age ranges, the education level, things like that. The crosstabs gives you greater details into the polls, and even if one person is 8 points behind another person in the run for governor, that doesn't mean it's all doom and gloom, because when you look at the crosstabs, the person that's 8 points behind may be leading in certain categories in the crosstabs, like among rich women, or rich white women, or rich black women, or rich Asian women, educated Hispanics, whatever it is. Those crosstabs are going to give you a more detailed landscape of what the polls are showing. Just most of the polls, they show one person versus another. It's usually a Democrat versus a Republican, and it gives you a percentage. This Democrat's got 38% of the people who went out and voted for that person, and then the Republican would have 40% or whatever. Okay, that 1 point difference is within the margin of error, and so it's a tied race, so to speak. Even if it was a 5 point difference, if the margin of error is plus or minus 5 or 6 points, it's basically a tie. And so, why do I say all this? It's because, listen, if Marjorie Taylor Greene would have just come out and said, I wanna go national, can you help me? That's not what she decided to do. What she decided to do was make up her own mind that she was going to go against President Trump in the release of the Epstein files, showing some Trump resistance. Okay, and that was the way I think that she figured that she was going to win the state, by being more moderate. Not being considered MAGA. She was on Steve Bannon's show every other week. She's definitely MAGA. She was definitely MAGA. I don't know about now. I mean, now she's aspiring to be the governor of Georgia. And did she sell her soul? Is she no longer MAGA because she wants to appeal to the broader Georgia? And just instead of just one district in Georgia, whatever county she's from. So I think of Susie Wiles, and you see where, Marjorie Taylor Greene, now she's getting married, and I don't know if it all plays into this nationalistic thing that she's trying to do. Now she's engaged to be married and all this other kind of stuff, and she's on the losing end of the Trump Marjorie Taylor Greene debate. Much like Susie Wiles, man. I mean, she took a page out of the Marjorie Taylor Greene handbook and keeping her aspirations, allegedly, her aspirations of becoming national, and then potentially being an RNC presidential candidate in 2028, for 2028. When you go against President Trump, you have to understand that there are consequences behind that. When you go against anybody, I mean, why else would you do it if you're not going to, if you don't have plans to nationalize yourself?
This just in, a revealing new interview with really the most powerful person in President Trump's White House beyond him, Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, commenting and going there on a wide range of topics, it seems, with Vanity Fair in a new series of interviews, from the handling of the Epstein investigation to her assessment of the big names on Donald Trump's team. Let's get to CNN's Elena Treen, who is at the White House. There seems to be a lot in there, Elena. What is your big takeaway?
I mean, look, I've covered the president, and I've also covered Susie Wiles for years now, Kate, and this is one of the most candid interviews and stories that she's offered really from the entire time I've done that. This is incredibly candid, some of the things that she was admitting, because I will tell you too, Wiles is someone who often likes to operate kind of in the shadows and quietly. She doesn't like to draw attention to herself, and that's why I think some of what people are waking up and reading this morning is so stunning to hear about. But let me get into some of the main things that I found very notable from what Chris Whipple, who works with Vanity Fair, detailed from their conversations. One is that Wiles referred to President Trump as someone having a, quote, alcoholic personality. She also talked a lot about the vice president, J.D. Vance, someone who I should note, had this conversion that Whipple noted as well from never Trumper to a MAGA acolyte. Susie Wiles essentially said that change, that conversion has been, quote, sort of political. And she said the vice president has been a, quote, conspiracy theorist for a decade. She also talked about Russell Vought. He is the White House budget chief, but he's also, of course, one of the architects of that notorious Project 2025 conservative blueprint for the future of the Republican Party, something that Trump had previously, of course, disavowed. She argued that Vought is, quote, a right-wing absolute zealot. And then she also went into a number of different things. One, she talked about Pam Bondi, the attorney general, someone who is one of her closest friends, I should note, in this administration. She argued that Bondi, quote, completely whiffed the handling of the Epstein file. She also talked about how the president who came in.
Right, I do agree with that. I think Pam Bondi oversold the Epstein file leaks. She said, yeah, I had all those files on my desk and they under review right now. So if you're reviewing them, how you interview with the press corps? Now, members of your staff could be viewing them. I get it. But the Epstein file release was so weak because what you had in your possession was almost public knowledge. The extra step that the Department of Justice had to take was to get the courts to grant unsealing sealed Ghislaine Maxwell's testimony and other exhibits that would have furthered the whole narrative behind Jeffrey Epstein. And so, look, people keep popping in and out. At one point, I had 2 viewers. But Pam Bondi, and I don't understand, like people like DC Drano and all the other social media platform influencers, when this thing first busted loose, you know, they were standing outside the White House with a bunch of binders filled with flight logs and names and all this other kind of stuff. Like, yeah, we got the pudding. Nah, it didn't work. It was a psyops. It was a psyops, right? Because the American public wasn't put on the fact that there were sealed documents that only a judge could unseal, and that's testimony in the courts and other type of media and sources that Ghislaine Maxwell and even Jeffrey Epstein himself, amongst other people who were complicit in his alleged operation, you know, only judges can rule on unsealing that information, and that happened about a week and a half ago. And now you're seeing, you know, about a week ago, now you're seeing the drip drop of pictures and things like that from the Epstein file. So Pam Bondi totally messed up the premiere of the Epstein file, because I don't think she understood the breadth and the depth of what it took to release the information in its entirety.
Also talked about how the president, who came in and offered a series of pardons to really roughly 1,000 people who were convicted for their crimes on January 6th, she essentially admitted that she had urged the president not to pardon those who had committed violent crimes on January 6th and on the Capitol attack. She also talked about how she disagreed with him sometimes when it came to tariffs, saying that she had urged him to delay some of the tariffs that he ultimately announced. And it goes on. There's a lot of other areas where she kind of talks about kind of disagreeing with him, but also ultimately her role is as a facilitator rather than, you know, past White House chiefs that we've seen, notably people like John Kelly during the president's first administration, who at times tried to hold him back. She sees as her job trying to kind of shape what he does, but also not preventing him from doing what he wants to do. One very notable quote as well that stuck out to me, just given the context of what's very much in the news right now, is Venezuela. She admitted publicly that one of the goals of this administration and the president is actually to see regime change in Venezuela and oust Nicolas Maduro. I should note that is not what the White House line has been on this. The White House line has been that this is all about trying to crack down on narco terrorists and illegal drug trafficking. She essentially said this on Venezuela. She said, quote, "He wants to keep on blowing boats up until Maduro cries uncle. And people way smarter than me on that say that he will." Again, a major contradiction in what we've heard from the White House on all of this. And the last thing I just want to quickly point you to, there's a lot in this. I do encourage our audience to actually go and read these very lengthy and detailed articles from Vanity Fair. But she talked about retribution, and she said that she had some sort of agreement with the president that she didn't want him to be focused on score settling, that she was going to give him 90 days and then he kind of had to move on from it. But she also acknowledged that some of the recent indictments we've seen against some of the president's political foes, people like the former FBI director James Comey or the New York Attorney General Letitia James, both people who we've seen this Trump administration now bring indictments against. She admitted that, yeah, that kind of is political. She said the Letitia James indictment specifically, she said that one you could call retribution. And so incredible stuff in here from Wiles, who, again, one of the most powerful.
So again, I will say that Susie Wiles did not have to go to Vanity Fair and say all this nonsense to give CNN, ABC, CBS, MS Now, CNBC a reason to come out and report this, because any news that discredits Trump's authority, undermines his authority as the executive, the chief executive of the executive branch. That means the executive branch gets things done. We help nations rebuild. We help cities rebuild. We help counties rebuild. This resistance, this type of coverage of President Trump is, what Susie Wiles did was wrong. I truly believe that she knows she made a mistake, and I hope that she shuts the fuck up from now on until Trump gives up office in 2028 or 2029, January 2029. Okay? So it is what it is, man, but Susie Wiles needs to shut the fuck up.
People, if not the most powerful person in this White House, apart from Trump, being very, very candid in this interview, Kate.
A lot more to come. Elena Treen, thank you so much. Important that you're hearing publicly, really, for the first time.
I mean, and Susie Wiles gave mainstream media and left-leaning other alternative platforms to use this storyline to bash Trump. Why would she do that? 3 reasons. Either she's genuinely frustrated, or she's trying to nationalize herself and having drawn a distinct line between her and Trump, or she's using this as a narrative change. Because the narrative before all of this, as I said, was narco boat shootings, Somali fraud, and what is it? Narco boat shooting, Somali fraud. I'll just leave it at that. Right? So now we got this new narrative of Susie Wiles talking about, oh shit, Trump is wrong for going after, holding people accountable that try to go after him, right? Letitia James, $454 million fine for doing what any real estate owner would do. Any real estate owner would do. It was a victimless, it wasn't even a crime for what Letitia James charged him for. And now he's going after Letitia James for the same thing because he has some researchers look into her real estate dealings, and it comes to find out that she done worse than he was accused of. And I just find it rich. I really do. I find it rich for her to come out and say this is some retribution. It's not called retribution. It's called accountability. We need to hold these people accountable. But in the meantime, let's get to more videos about how this negative publicity on President Trump and his staff that Susie Wiles caused. And it's the reason why, and listen, well, I'm not going to say it because I'm just not going to say it because, I think it's going to get me in trouble. But I think that certain people should not be leaders of anything, because if you lead by emotion, that is not the right way to go. You need to lead by logic. And so I think this Susie Wiles story is somebody that in Susie Wiles that is leading by emotion, and I don't think that she has any place in a leadership role when it comes to molding young minds into becoming future leaders, aspiring to do anything other than make their own beds and clean up after themselves. That's what I would entrust Susie Wiles to do. I just think that she's being disingenuous in terms of, she said what she said to Vanity Fair, but in recent posts since the interview, she's been, pushing back on X, formerly known as Twitter, and pushing back on other social media platforms. But the truth of the matter is that you went into a situation knowing that your words were going to be taken out of context. You were in a hostile environment knowing that Vanity Fair is a left-leaning publication, but you chose anyway to press on. And this is what the video is really about, is really trying to assess whether or not you're genuinely frustrated about how the Trump administration is working, or you're trying to nationalize yourself and draw a distinct line between yourself and President Trump on certain issues, and certain issues that people in his circle also share, to be one of the primary candidates in the 2028 presidential election, or are you doing it to change the narrative? And so, the narrative before this was narco boat shootings, Somali fraud in Minnesota, and maybe the Seditious Six video with Mark Kelly from Arizona, a senator, right? But what Susie Wiles did was provide ammunition for the left-leaning media organizations to continue to bash Trump on any and everything that they can find.
And President Trump's chief of staff is speaking out about the administration in a series of interviews with Vanity Fair. Susie Wiles says Trump has a, quote, alcoholic personality and will go for it whenever he sees an opportunity for retribution. She also calls Vice President Vance a conspiracy theorist for a decade and says Attorney General Pam Bondi whiffed on the Epstein files controversy. Now Wiles is calling the article a disingenuously framed hit piece. White House correspondent Karen Travers is here for more on that. Hi, Karen. So Wiles is taking issue with this article, but she's not denying the specific quotes, and some of them are pretty eye-opening. So how is she explaining some of these statements?
Yeah, and this was a series of interviews that she did with Vanity Fair's Chris Whipple over many months. 11 interviews, he said, that he put together in these two pieces. In her statement posted on social media, Susie Wiles says this is a disingenuously framed hit piece on me, the president, the White House staff, and the cabinet. But she also says that this was done to paint an overwhelmingly chaotic and negative narrative about the president and our team. But Diane, this piece has Washington talking because there are some incredible headlines in here. She talks about the president's retribution campaign, saying that when there's an opportunity, he will go for it, but that there was a loose agreement that the score settling would end before the first 90 days of his term were over. She talked about Elon Musk, who came in and was put in charge of the Department of Government Efficiency. She said that he was an odd duck whose actions were not always rational and sometimes left her aghast. She talked about J.D. Vance, who at one point was very anti-Trump and then, of course, is now part of the MAGA fold. And she said that that conversion was sort of political. She talked about the tariffs that the president put in place and said that there was a huge disagreement about this major policy decision of the president's, saying that this was a conversation and disagreement about whether they were a good idea. And on the president's current strategy in the Caribbean against Venezuela, she says that that strategy is to keep blowing up boats until Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, says uncle. Diane?
And Wiles also revealed President Trump is what she called the Epstein file. But she says he's not in the file doing anything awful. Talk to me about that part of this interview.
Yeah, she also said that she underestimated the swirling controversy about the Epstein files, but specifically as it relates to President Trump. This is what Susie Wiles had to say. She said, Trump is in the file, and we know he is in the file. He's not in the file doing anything awful. She said he was on Epstein's plane. He's on the manifest. There were, sort of young, single, whatever. I know it's a passé word, but sort of young, single playboys together. Just a very striking comment to hear from somebody so close to the president. She also talked about people close to the president, including Vice President Vance, the FBI Director Kash Patel, saying that they have been very into this story because they have been conspiracy theorists for a decade, referring to J.D. Vance and talking about Kash.
All right, you heard that, right? I'm not going to keep you guys for too long, man. So all of this because Susie Wiles has a motive to expand beyond her current role as the White House Chief of Staff into something greater. Because if she wasn't aspiring to do something greater, then why would she provide interviews to a left-leaning organization such as Vanity Fair? And to say these candid things about members of your own staff, you didn't think that was going to get out? We headed into the 2026 midterm elections, and you gonna go and do a bonehead shit thing like this unless you intentionally did it? Are you a rhino, Susie Wiles? Are you secretly working with the Democrats in a deep state to sabotage our 47th president, Donald J. Trump? Please tell me that's not the case, because what it looks like right now, you are providing talking points to ABC, CBS, NBC, CNBC, MS Now, CNN, all these talking heads that are the arm of the Democratic Party. And how does this help us in the 2026 midterm elections as Republicans? Like, we need to be getting ahead of this. We need to avoid this type of stuff. What are y'all thinking, man? Like, what is Susie Wiles thinking? I'm baffled with this. She has the nerve to daggone push back, boy. Oh, they took my shit out of context, man. You never should have been there. Never should have been there. You sat in that chair. You got that free bottle of water that they offered you when you stepped through the door. Hey, my last clip. I'm gonna get into J.D. Vance's former Marine. I want to get his response to what Susie Wiles said about him.
We'll take one more question.
Mr. Vice President, Jacob Bogage from the Washington Post. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Same to you.
Unfortunately, I have to ask a bit of an off-topic question from affordability because news events do intervene, and that is the interviews that White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles gave to Vanity Fair, in which she's quoted as referring to you as, excuse me, and again, not my words, sir, but a conspiracy theorist of a decade, and described your transformation from someone who once opposed President Trump to now his vice president as an act of political expediency. And I'd like to give you the chance to respond to that, sir.
Well, first of all, if Susie, I'll trust what you said. I haven't looked at the article. I of course have heard about it, but conspiracy theorist. Sometimes I am a conspiracy theorist, but I only believe in the conspiracy theories that are true. Yeah. And by the way, Susie and I have joked in private and in public about that for a long time. For example, I believed in the crazy conspiracy theory back in 2020 that it was stupid to mask 3-year-olds at the height of the COVID pandemic, that we should actually let them develop some language skills. I believed in this crazy conspiracy theory that the media and the government were covering up the fact that Joe Biden was clearly unable to do the job. And I believed in the conspiracy theory that Joe Biden was trying to throw his political opponents in jail rather than win an argument against his political opponents. So, at least on some of these conspiracy theories, it turns out that a conspiracy theory is just something that was true 6 months before the media admitted it. And that's my understanding. Now, look, I do want to say something about Susie, though, because, again, having not read this article, Susie is a person I've come to know very, very well. And, a lot of you probably ask yourself, what is it like behind the scenes? What's going on actually behind the scenes of the Trump administration? And I'll tell you, the president is exactly in private who he is in public. Like, I'll tell you a little story. Maybe a week or so ago, I walk into the Oval Office and Marco and I are sitting there talking with the president about something. He says, stop. And he looks at our shoes and says, you guys have terrible shoes. So he goes and gets a shoe catalog. Now remember, this is the Christmas season, so the president's got some holiday cheer. He goes and gets a shoe catalog and gets his favorite shoes and orders like 4 pairs of shoes for me and 4 pairs of shoes for Marco, because he's like, we need our vice president or secretary of state to look their very best. And, then we went back to talking about whatever major, international issue we were talking about. Again, he is exactly in private who he is in public. That's not true of most people in Washington, D.C. It's not. And I've seen so many people who will say one thing to the president's face, Democrats and Republicans, and then will do the exact opposite behind the scenes. You know why I really, you know what they are, and you know why I really love Susie Wiles? Because Susie is who she is in the president's presence. She's the same exact person when the president isn't around. I've never seen Susie Wiles say something to the president and then go and counteract him or subvert his will behind the scenes. And that's what you want in a staffer. Because as much as I love Susie, the American people didn't elect any staffer. They elected the President of the United States. And what you want in a staffer is a person who understands they are there to effectuate the will of the American people, and they're there to follow the orders of the duly elected Commander-in-Chief of the United States. And Susie Wiles, we have our disagreements. We agree on much more than we disagree, but I've never seen her be disloyal to the President of the United States, and that makes her the best White House Chief of Staff that I think the President could ask for. And the last thing I'll say is if any of us have learned a lesson from that Vanity Fair article, I hope that the lesson is we should be giving fewer interviews to mainstream media outlets. So with that lesson internalized, I'm going to stop taking questions and just leave you with one final note. And again, it's just a note of gratitude. This is the coolest.
So J.D. Vance just said that Susie Wiles had no business doing an interview or a series of interviews at Vanity Fair. Do your job for the American people and what you signed up to be on the Trump team for. Shut your mouth. If you don't like it, resign. And hopefully you've been training somebody to take your place. Because, again, if you're doing it out of genuine frustration, you're doing it to nationalize yourself, or if you're doing it to change the narrative, I'll let my viewers decide for themselves. But let me know what you think in the comments below, man. Like, share, and subscribe.